Detroit Pistons select Luke Kennard from Duke University.
Bang! Samaje Christian, 3.
Welcome, everybody. Another episode of the Triple Double Podcast. This is Corey Albertson of Triple Double Prospects, along with our producer, Jason Morrow of 270 Hoops. And today our guest is TJ number 2, a.k.a. TJ Peatross of NEO Spotlight. NEO Spotlight is a website. You can find it at neohiospotlight.com, covering Northeast Ohio on a web platform, as well as an NCAA scouting service and event host. TJ, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. I appreciate you having me on. Been following the podcast since you guys started, and excited to get this thing going.
Good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on too. I know it's been a tough couple of days here. So I got home last night about 6 o'clock and text you, and you didn't get home till almost 11 o'clock, right?
Yeah, it's every single time I leave Louisville and head home, it's a mandatory traffic as I enter Cincinnati. So I'm assuming it has something to do with you. So I blame you and Rick Pitino and the Bearcats. I blame everybody.
I don't know, something about that traffic between Louisville and Cincinnati. I don't know what it is, man. Everybody's trying to get onto the Kentucky Speedway exit, I guess. But no, I mean, I feel good. I got home last night about 6, got some coffee going, got some evaluations done, got an online recap done, got ready for this. So, man, let's jump into it, man. We got 1 week to go in the live period. You got to bring your energy.
I know, man. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be so excited when this coming weekend is over. Like you said, man, it's just been a long grind for everybody. And everybody's putting a lot of miles on the car. So.
Good deal. Why don't you go give everybody the rundown? For the old school basketball people in here, they know people. They know the Kurt Stubbs and John Stovall's and Chaz Wolfs, but you and Zach and Jason and me are kind of the younger guys. I guess I'm barely on the younger side, but give us your story on kind of how you got into this. I remember I first ran into you. I don't know what summer it was, a few years back. Zach and me were up in Cleveland for Steve Newton Showcase.
Yeah, it was either I think it was either that time or I think I ran into you guys down in the City Series as well. I'm not sure exactly what year that was either, but just like everybody else, I've just always been a hoops junkie. I remember when I was like 8 years old, I was sitting in my grandpa's house and NBA TV, first started, and I was like, man, there's a channel that has basketball 24/7. I made him pay for it immediately, and I remember writing in letters to NBA TV, like trying to get on there when I was in elementary school. So just always kind of been obsessed with the game. And I played in high school. Had a cup of coffee in college, and then it was kind of afterwards. I met a guy named Steve Newton. One of the better video guys in Ohio. He was doing a great job, and I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, man," I was like, I respect what you're doing. I admire what you're doing, and I just kind of volunteered and helped him write, and kind of expand the coverage a little bit in Northeast Ohio, and it just kind of took off from there. I started meeting a lot of college coaches. Met you guys. Got introduced a little bit to the scouting world and kind of the ins and outs, and it's just kind of taken off from there.
Well, one thing, you've done in terms of starting with Steve was, when Steve came onto the scene, I remember it, and he really kind of like what Ty Kish did when he first started City League Hoops, is he had a real City League type of niche, and then Steve started doing, Garfield Heights, Shaker Heights, Cleveland Central Catholic, all those, and then you hopped in there, and you're in the Northeast Ohio guy like your website is, but you're not necessarily a Cleveland guy. And the Cleveland area, or not the Cleveland area, the Northeast Ohio area is so big with Cleveland, Akron, Canton, all the stuff in between. And you've really developed a reputation among college coaches for being able to get a good idea of the kids across the whole geographical landscape, from high major Division I, which there are only so many kids, it's not that difficult to keep track of, all the way down to Division III kids. And in preparing for this, I like to think about different things about different people. And one thing that stuck out about you is just how many kids you follow both in your region and then, other Division I, Division II kids throughout the state of Ohio. So you put a lot of time into this basketball thing. And how do you just kind of stay ahead of the curve with all this stuff?
To me, it was kind of a gradual climb. When I first started with Steve, I was fresh out of college. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just so excited to be a part of something that had anything to do with basketball. So, I kind of started in Northeast Ohio. Hey, man, I was like, I'm new. Let me just know the ins and outs of my entire area. I want to know every single kid from Akron to Cleveland to Youngstown to, Ashtabula to Warren. I was like, what? And I'm sure Flair's going to laugh at that. But, I figured, I was like, hey, if I can get to know these guys first, then I can kind of slowly, branch out. And I feel like that's kind of what I've done. I'm entering, my fourth year of kind of doing this. And I feel like I have a really good grip on Ohio. Obviously, I'm starting to, leak into Western Pennsylvania a little bit and get into the other TJ's territory. And, I try and touch Detroit about 2 to 3 times a year. And, I figured I might as well. Detroit's about 3 hours away, and it's actually closer to me than Cincinnati is. So it kind of worked out, man. But like I said earlier, it's just a lot of hitting the road. A lot of driving. And Ohio, especially is great for those, like you said earlier. There's not too many high major guys all over the place, but I think it's really good, low major, mid major guys. And we have a lot of those schools, whether it's Kent, Akron, Youngstown, OU, Wright State. So it's just kind of made sense to me. And I think this is the first summer where I really started to cover the entire state. And I would say in the months of April, June, and July, I feel like I covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, the more you see, the more you're going to get comparisons that help with your evaluation. So I know one thing, it's easy for me to evaluate kids as to where they fit in terms of kind of a ranking situation in Cincinnati, Dayton, Northern Kentucky. But then it can be hard to really judge, trying to be unbiased, trying to look at a broader scope where they fit on a statewide level in terms of level of play for college. And the more you see kids from different areas, you get to see, well, our kids from our region tend to be better at this, or this kid compares favorably or unfavorably to this kid. And you just get more of a sense of what that pecking order is. And I think that's extremely, extremely important, because if you're talking about, well, the best kid in Northeast Ohio is this kid, well, 1 year that might mean that kid's a future pro. 1 year that might mean that kid's just an okay, mid-major MAC level kid. So, the more you can see guys, and then it's even better when you start to get into like Western Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh is so hot right now. When you look at, the 2 prep schools that are popping up there, Detroit always has players. I know you're trying to get into, something more like seeing Illinois and Indiana AAU teams. You see different stuff. For me, there's a huge difference in the way that the game of basketball is played. 10 minutes from my house, when you cross over the Ohio River, the Kentucky high school game plays way different than the Ohio game, and vice versa. The Cincinnati game plays different than the Columbus game plays different than the Cleveland game. So that's a good thing. And then I know one thing I've talked with you about, and that you've seen so many of these kids, and you're really taking advantage of the technological platform, something along the lines of like a huddle.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one thing, from this past weekend, you kind of touched on a little bit, where I really liked the guy, but, mind you, I'd only seen him 2 to 3 times. And I liked him a lot more than the guy from up my way who I had seen 20 times. And, you were kind of on the opposite spectrum. And that kind of, goes back to something that Chaz Wolf said one time. He said, these guys typically don't get better the more you see them. They only get worse. So that's kind of what, led me to get out and just kind of experiment and see other areas of the state and, other areas of the Midwest. Because it like you said, if you say, hey, the top guy in Northeast Ohio, you're like, hey, he's got to be, a top 10 guy in the state. Well, you don't know if you don't leave the area. So that was kind of.
And the talent is so cyclical. I mean, even since I've been doing it, class of 2011 is when I really first started doing statewide stuff. And there have been times where Cincinnati's had the best players. There have been times where Cleveland's had the best players. There have been times where Toledo's had the best players, and it's such a small area when you look at population versus the rest of the state. But that's exactly how it goes. I think what you just said is super interesting, and it's something our next podcast after this one we're going to do is with Alex Klein talking about NBA draft stuff. And you said the kids don't get better the more you see them. It's kind of my thoughts now, and like looking at the NBA draft. Like some of these kids, they keep doing this for so long. They keep scrutinizing this kid that's going to be a top 5 pick. And when June comes around to do the draft, they're like, well, shit, what is the kid good at? Because there have been so many little holes nitpicked in his game. But, that's one of the go-to kind of scouting strategy mindsets you have to develop is, how do you balance how many times you've seen a kid versus what that kid's real level is. And, looking ahead to Northeast Ohio, you've done, I think, a great job of what Zach and Jason have done in Columbus, what I've tried to do down here in Cincinnati, to some success and some failure, which is really building a community. You do stuff in the fall, you do stuff with showcases. I know, like Zach and Jason, like myself, you're not one that's trying to make a money grab off the kids. You maybe make more of a money off of having the colleges come. So, what are some of the events that you're planning on doing, between when AAU ends in less than a week and the start of high school practice?
Yeah, that's something, around this time, it's kind of hard to really put all of your focus into it, with all the live periods. You're trying to make sure you get your reports on time. You're trying to, update your rankings, add kids to your databases, things like that. But something I did back in June, I did an open gym for rising freshmen and rising sophomores, because I spent a lot of the spring looking at all the 17U and 16U guys. So that was an opportunity for me to see a lot of the class of 2022, which is something, obviously, I don't spend a whole lot of time in middle school gyms. I probably have to, get in touch with Kurt Stubbs about how that goes. But it was just nice for me, to see some of those younger guys and kind of get them under my belt, at least get a head start on that. But coming up in September, I do my big event every year. It's the Super 60. Pretty much the last few years, it's been mostly, I would say, 80%, Northeast Ohio guys. I get a couple of Cincinnati kids that come up, a couple of Columbus kids. But this year I'm really trying to, branch that event out as well and get that, involving the entire state. Reaching out.
Is that the event that you do? It's more, instead of a showcase, the word is more of like a combine, right?
Yeah. So what I do, the kids will go through combine testing. You get their true heights, you get their weights, you get their wingspans. You get like their vertical jumps. You kind of get some measurements on the kids, get an idea of how well they can move. And then so half the kids are doing testing, while the other half of the kids are playing. So how I did it last year worked out pretty well. So I had 3 courts. On 2 courts, there were, 2 games going. So you had 4 teams playing, and then I had 4 teams off. So while 4 teams were playing, the other 4 teams were going through testing. They might have did, their broad jump and their vertical jump during that time. And then they go play a game. Then the kids who just got done playing the game will go do their broad jump and vertical jump. And it was kind of like a cycle. So you play a game, you go do 2 tests. You play a game, you do 2 different tests. So it kind of flowed pretty smoothly, in terms of that last year. Something I'm going to have to experiment a little bit with this year as well.
Okay. No, that's great stuff. And I think I might want to incorporate that a little bit more into what I do in the fall. My open gyms, I've kind of prided myself on it being more of a casual thing in terms of structure. I really like to let the kids kind of run the structure because I'm a huge, huge believer. I've talked about this before on the podcast, in letting the kids organize it as to who's got next in the game, calling their own fouls and stuff, because my personal outlook on it is if the kids are doing that, you can get a little better feel for how much a kid wants to win in an open gym setting. That's why we do kind of smaller amount of courts and the winners stay on and whatnot. But I really, really love the combine aspect of it for kids who aren't on the court, because by using less courts, we tend to have a waiting list. And basically a week from today, this is the Monday after the second live period when we're recording this, a week from today, I want to really start working on what I'm going to do in the fall, and I'm still tinkering with ideas myself. But no, that's great that you're doing that. And what it creates, like we said, is a community. And then I've talked on this podcast before with other guys, is I think Northeast Ohio in general has very good culture, especially when you get up to the Cleveland area, towards like the inner city of Cleveland, of, the kids tend to really get along and want to support each other. And, Steve had some things to do with that. You had some things to do with that. And, there's a lot of really, really good things about that. And then going back into talking about your event, one thing I've noticed with you, we've shared information back and forth and, trying to make sure we cover the whole state. And you're very, very big on creating these databases. And your databases tend to be very good with accurate heights, knowing who's on what AAU team, where a college coach can see them, listing a prospect's phone number. I mean, you've really compiled all of that for all the Ohio classes.
Yeah, and when you send those out to a college coach, they kind of look at it, it gives them an idea, kind of where guys, measure up, gets their contact information and things like that. But I'm sure and Zach and Chad and all these other guys. I mean, there's a lot of time that goes into those. All the text messages, the phone calls, the DMing kids, making sure they have the same phone number. Because I don't know what changes more, their phone numbers or their AAU teams. I think that. So that's one thing I just kind of try and stay on a little bit, and I can admit I'm a little bit OCD, and I like to be as organized as possible. If I'm not organized, I tend to be stressed out. And when you're covering such a large area, there's so many kids, and just want to kind of keep track of everybody. When you're seeing them. Kind of how they were, trying to keep like little notes. It's just so much that goes into it that I think a lot of people just they wouldn't understand or they wouldn't expect.
Right, and I mean, in developing that database, it's a lot of work on the data entry part, which is never any fun. I mean, when I get home from the AAU tournament, the first thing I do is look through that whole roster packet of 100 pages and write down, here are the 100 or so. I think for this past weekend in Louisville, I had like 89. Here are like the 89 prospects that I want to put a blurb about in my report for the college coaches, and then entering in all of their measurables, their height, their school, their position, their class, all that stuff. I mean, that can be very tedious, but in reality, your real asset that you're sending out is the evaluation itself. And the only way to get a plethora of evaluations is to constantly hit the road. And, as I've gotten older, I've changed the way I've done things. I've gone a little bit more localized. I've tried to really value quality of evaluation over quantity of evaluation in terms of avoiding something, like a team camp or a smaller camp thing where I can really focus in on more of like a quality high school shootout where I know it's going to be all top competition. But you've really been able to use June and so far in July to see the whole state, and you've been everywhere and have not only had quality of evaluation but quantity of evaluation. So, where all have you been in this month, and how many miles have you put on the car?
I don't want to answer that last question. I don't even want to know in terms of how many miles I've been. But I would say in June, to me personally, like you said, I get a much better evaluation when I watch kids with their high school teams. A lot of times when you see a guy, especially when they're on these food circuit teams, you don't get to see them with the ball very often. You don't get to see, everything that they can do. Sometimes it's hard to evaluate a kid's ball skills. But when they're the best guy on the team, they have no choice but to have the ball. So in June, that was probably my busiest month. I mean, I was in Ohio State's team camp, Kent State's team camp, Youngstown State, 2 days at Akron, 2 days at Cleveland State, 2 days at Dayton. So it was just awesome for me to see a lot of these kids. And I probably, because of that, I won't need to see Pickering and Central at all during the high school season. I mean, when I kid you not, they were at, I want to say all of those camps minus Youngstown State. I think they were at every single one. So I feel like I've seen those kids more than Stokes. So.
Well, when you live in Pickerington, you look for excuses to not hang out with George Howard. So if you can go out of town and go to a camp and everything, I mean, we can't go to Value City Furniture every day. We got to just do other stuff. So that's good that they're doing that. I really hope George hears this. But that's good. That's good. But I think you made a hell of a point on seeing kids with their high school teams in terms of role. That's not something I'd thought of for kind of the topics for today, because it brings me to, at AAU, it's very common, you want to assemble the best players. And when you're doing that, especially in a small geographical sense, which is majority of the non-shoe sponsor teams are, when you put all the best players you can get in an area together, you're going to end up more often than not with a whole lot of guards. So kids are going to have to play out of position. Kids are going to have to play as a point guard with multiple point guards on the court. So, there's certainly kids. Like I remember a kid, 2016 from Dayton Thurgood Marshall, DJ Hoskins was a really good guard. But on the AAU circuit, he played with Xavier Simpson, who's at Michigan. And Xavier was such an elite level point guard that when DJ would get the ball,
Xavier with the X or a Z?
It was an X at the time. It's now a Z. There's a Z now. It was an X. And X was such a great point guard that when DJ would get in the ball, X usually wasn't coming out the game. He helped him win, so DJ would play off the ball. But then when you went to Thurgood, you could see, well, here's what DJ can really do from a positive standpoint at the point guard position. So, that really speaks again to if you're new in scouting. And I mean, you're a guy, when you look in the Ohio spectrum, you're kind of still the new guy, even though you've been doing it for a few years now, along with Zach and Jason. I know you guys are pretty similar and when you guys came into it, but the newer you are, the more you want to get evaluations. And I mean, I remember, when I was at Cincy Prep Hoops Report back in the day, I tried to hit as many things as I can. Zach and Jason go to more high school games than anybody. Part of that is they've got a hell of an advantage in Columbus. They tend to play every night. Down here, you can only usually get games Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday, and everybody plays. But, the more you can see games, and that's great for you because of your geography up in Northeast Ohio. You've got to cover so much ground with getting all the way from Cleveland to Akron to Canton and everything. I mean, you've got to take advantage of as many nights as you can.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to say, I think Jason and Zach probably do as good of a job as anybody in the Midwest in terms of their coverage. I mean, as far as stats, scores, updated schedules, those two guys do an unbelievable job. I'm sure I'm not the only one that uses it. But I love to kind of look at their calendar and I say, there's not too many good Northeast Ohio games today. Let me go, check 270 and, see what kind of notable Columbus games there are. So they do such a great job, man, and they've led the way for me. Them, you, Chaz Wolf, TJ Cully. And, just some other guys. It's just it's been good for me. I try to always be a student. With what I do, try and always learn something. One thing I've kind of based my life on is everyone that you know is going to know at least one thing that you don't. So I always try and have an ear to listen, whether it's you, college coaches, and things like that, man. So it's definitely awesome just to kind of travel and, see so many different people. And one thing I wanted to touch on really quick, going back to what you were saying about, some of these AAU teams. And I will say, how some of these teams are laid out. And the guys that really benefit from that are some of these D2 and low major coaches. I can't tell you, how many times I've had a coach you reach out to me and say, hey, a D2 coach, and he goes, hey, who is such and such playing with? And I say, hey, he's with All Ohio or he's with C2K. And it's almost like a sigh of relief. Like they're happy because, a lot of times they know they're playing in front of, whether it's the wrong crowd, in terms of coaches or the wrong system. And they think they have a chance that they're going to be able to grab a kid. Whereas if he was on a better fit, maybe a shoot circuit team, he might have went, a level higher. So that's something I've always kind of found interesting. And it's weird. You see a lot of D2 coaches at some of these shoot circuit events. And I think that's why.
Well, in 2012, we used to see All Ohio Red, OBC. King James was there at the time. Couple other programs. My group was the Phenoms. Ohio Varsity had really, really good teams. Then there's always Cincinnati Lakers had really good teams, and there were always a mom and pop team in each age group. But you used to see week in and week out, you would see the same 7-8 teams at each age group, and you would become intimately familiar with the game of of each kid on each of those teams. And I was thinking about this actually on the drive back yesterday. There were some positives to that. The top end talent in your state, nobody could ever question your evaluations because you saw them so much. And the nice thing from a rankings perspective is you got to see those kids play against each other. It wasn't a big deal to see All Ohio Red play OBC, play the Phenoms, play the Lakers, play Ohio Varsity. Nowadays, it's a huge deal. That never happens. And it's not, people want to point fingers at the AAU team saying they don't play each other. That's not true. The reality is the scheduling of events doesn't allow for it. Maybe you can get it at Spiece, but it requires a scheduling mismatch of things where, each team advances and whatnot. But it's just the schedule doesn't allow for it with all the shoe circuit stuff. But it's opened a – no, go ahead.
And just kind of going off of that too, I mean, you got a lot of times in April, some of these shoe circuit teams, they'll go up to the NY2LA event, which is one of the very first weekends in April on non-live period. Just to, see who they're going to keep on the team, just kind of get guys reps with each other. And then they might go to, the Storm Classic, I think. It's that second weekend in April. And then you start to get to the two live periods. So you got to think a lot of these teams are coming off of 4 weekends in a row, of playing. And then you say, hey, let's all meet up at Spieth. A lot of times these kids need a break.
Oh, if I had a shoe circuit team, I wouldn't send them to Spieth. Yeah, if I had a shoe circuit team, I wouldn't send them to Spieth. It's just too much travel. And you're going to, I would be real scared to play 2 shoe circuit weekends and then play Spieth and then play another shoe circuit weekend. You're better off having a weekend off. And no matter who the kid is, if they're a Division II player, if they're not a college player, if they're a future NBA player, I mean, you need break. You need time to be a kid. You need, every single coach in here is not doing it for the money on the AAU circuit. So yeah, you need that break. I mean, that's critical. And, that's one of the things that the social media aspect has really opened up. When you look at, there's a lot of different opinions. For example, one of the hot topics on AAU among Ohio people is discussing, why don't these guys play each other and whatnot. I just gave you my opinion on it, but let's go a little bit of social media. So, we were together almost the entire weekend. I mean, this podcast is pretty much just reiterating, some of our private conversations or conversations with college coaches over the weekend. Zach and Jason were down there as well. So I'm gonna read through a couple tweets here, and I've shared 3 of these with you. I added a 4th one that I haven't shared with you. And I want to go over them, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on them. And the first one is this, and I was sitting there when the unnamed source who you quoted in your tweet said this. And it was a great comment. The whole conversation was a tremendous conversation. And you quoted on Twitter this coach without naming him, and it was a head coach of a Division II college program. And the coach said, if these kids are so blessed and honored to receive these offers, then why don't they take them? And that's in reference to seeing all these kids tweet, blessed to receive my 14th offer from X college, humbled to receive my first offer from Y college and everything. And, you tweeted that. It's gone viral. What are your thoughts on all of that?
I think it's kind of funny because a lot of people interpreted that in so many different ways. Some people were, replying saying, the kid earned the scholarship, or, why are we, making something negative out of it when in reality, you were obviously sitting there. It was a humorous tone to that statement.
Right.
But just like everything, there is a little bit of truth to every joke. So I think the coach was kind of just really poking fun at how like a copy and paste. Like, I'm convinced a lot of these kids will go to one of their friends who just received an offer, copy his tweet, and then just change the name of the school. So I think that's kind of what he was poking at. But I will say this is kind of funny to me. You see a lot of these kids say, "Oh, I'm blessed and honored to, receive an offer from, insert mid-major program here." If you're so blessed and honored, then, why are you waiting until, April or May after your senior year to, you're waiting for this high major school or, your dream school to come around. But if you're so blessed and honored, I think it's just kind of the choice of words is what the coach was pointing at.
That would be like a kid tweeting, pissed and angry not to receive an offer from Kentucky or something like that.
Right. Could you imagine like one of your friends, invite you, to their birthday party and you go, man, I'm blessed and honored to receive this invitation. But I'm going to wait and see what else I have going on that weekend.
How about blessed and honored to get a prom date? Yeah, buddy.
Seriously.
But I think there's a little context there too, and there was another Division II coach actually sitting between all of us when this tweet came out, and before the coach who said the comment and the tweet made the comment, the other coach said something along the lines of the way this conversation got started was he said, if we offer you a scholarship and you tweet it, or if we offer you a scholarship and you do not tweet it. There's not necessarily a right or a wrong way to do it, but it does make a statement about you as a kid and how your family handles the recruiting process. Again, not a positive and negative, but a statement nonetheless.
Correct. And I think Zach said something, I don't know if it was yesterday or if it was kind of in kind of response. I don't know if my tweet kind of, made him say this or kind of, sparked the idea. But he said a lot of times, us as adults, we've been around a lot longer than these kids. We have to keep that in mind. And I thought that was a great point that Zach made. But at the same time, I do think it's good to kind of make the kids aware, of what they're doing. Like you mentioned, I seen a kid say, I'm blessed to receive my 14th offer. Well, to me, that kind of says you're just collecting offers. Is there any genuine interest? Or it's almost like a lot of these kids are competing amongst each other. Right. Oh, you got your 12th. Well, I just got my 13th. How about that?
But there is a benefit to tweeting out the offers, and the college coaches probably don't like it because it exposes them into where they stand in the competition amongst each other to land a kid. But from a family perspective, there's probably a lot of benefit if you've got a kid to encourage them to tweet offers, because by doing that, it gets retweeted, it gets put up on verbal commits, other college coaches see it, and now the college coaches say, well, shit, this school from our conference offered this kid. Maybe they would know about it from hearing from the kid, but maybe they wouldn't. So now, it kind of helps you from an exposure standpoint as a player. So I don't think there's anything at all wrong with it. It's just the way you do it.
Correct. I think there's always two sides to every coin. And like you said, if you say, hey, I just got offered from this school, it's going to get a ton of retweets, like you said, verbal commits is going to post it. And that might spark another school to come see you, whether it's a team in that other school's conference or someone else. I do see the benefits of it. I'm not telling kids, I'm not implying, hey kids, don't tweet your offers, even though I'm sure the college coaches would love that, like you said. But yeah, it's just, to me, it's kind of the intent behind it.
Well, it was a jokey tweet, and with 280 characters, sometimes you can only do so much there, but. That's what it was. Correct. But let's look at the second one here. This is the one that we did not talk about beforehand. So I showed you this tweet in Louisville. I don't know if you remember it. This is from a high school coach in Cincinnati, Scott Kerr of Cincinnati Purcell Marion High School. Tremendous individual. Hope to have him on the podcast someday. Absolute animal. And Kerr was talking about his views on recruiting, and he's been very outspoken to me and on a public forum of he's had a lot of talent over the years. He coached at Clark Montessori, coached at Purcell Marion for a number of years now. Has had a lot of really talented players who he's felt were under recruited, and he's been made right in some sense that those guys have gone on to be good college basketball players. So what Coach Kerr tweeted was this. He says, I read some college coaches tweet about recruiting players, then watched them recruit the exact opposite. I've had high character, high GPA, highly coachable kids who have those same coaches that have passed on them, and those kids end up starting as freshmen. Hashtag save me the lecture. And what he's talking about there is maybe even throwing shade at some of the guys we've had on the podcast here who talk about an evaluation wanting kids who are very, very strong in the intangibles compartment with being high character, high academic kids. But then when a player without those intangibles arrives on that coach's doorstep for them to be able to swoop them up as a recruit, they go ahead and offer and take the commitment from that kid with maybe a questionable character because they decide to go for the talent instead of go for the safe thing that's maybe a better personality fit for their program.
Yeah, to me, man, at the end of the day, guys want players. If you have I don't care if you have a 4.0 GPA, you're the nicest kid in the world. I'm sure you're going to go very far in life, but you're not going to help a guy win games. And ultimately, I think that's what it comes down to. Whereas if the talent, kind of exceeds, the character, hey, you might want to take a gamble on the kid. And I think a lot of that, depends on the personality of the coach. Some coaches tend to do very well, with kids like that. I would say, Coach Hugs, for example, he, like, no question, he takes guys that, have question marks or, hey, they might get, kind of a bad rap sometimes, and then they go to West Virginia, and most of the time, those kids graduate with no issues at all. So I think a lot of it really just depends on the coach and just kind of the personalities. And a lot of times, if you're in a Christian school, then you have to be a little more cautious about who you recruit and who you go after, because your school is just completely set up differently.
Well, classic quote. I think he said, it's not even just a one-time quote. He says it all the time. Whenever they talk about John Calipari with one and dones, he always says, if I could choose between talent and experience, I'll choose talent every time. And that's different than what we're talking about here. We're talking about talent versus character, but it goes to show talent is what wins the games. And I'm with Coach Kerr 100% in that, right, it's a shame that he's got kids that are being undervalued. And I wish I could explain it, because it does happen and there's no way to explain it, and it sucks when that happens. But I also understand from the college coach's point of view, right, they've got to go with the guy that has the most talent. I think his point more than anything is, don't forget about those intangibles, because, they can trump talent. And, what he said with guys who he's had that, I know he's told me he's had guys that Division I, Division II schools have said, well, they're not a good enough player. And then they go on to be successful. So that's really, I think, what he's really talking about here. The third one of the four here, this comes from Steve Q over with Matt's Mustangs, coaches the 16 and under team. I thought he had a great tweet the other day talking about the live periods where we are in the month of July. Some kids getting the exposure they want, some kids not getting that exposure, even though they're playing in the same AAU tournaments. And his tweet was this. He said, in AAU, relationships get college coaches out to games, and then the kids have to perform. If your organization has no ties to coaches for them to come watch you play, you're going to struggle to get recruited.
And I mean, that's 100% true. A lot of times, I know how I feel when I go to these tournaments. I'm sure, Jason, Zach, and, any other, scout feels the same way. When you walk into a gym, like where we were just at, and they have how many courses? Like 19, I believe?
Roughly.
Yeah, if you have 19 different games going on at a time, it's tough to see everybody. So what are these college coaches going to do? They're going to, kind of gravitate towards, the programs that they have relationships with, too, they're familiar with. So I agree with that. You have to branch out. You have to be personable.
You heard me. Sorry to interrupt you, but you heard me all weekend complain about one AAU team that was down there this past weekend, and college coaches, we were sitting there, kind of echoed my sentiment, which was the coach is extremely difficult to deal with regarding his kids. He's always telling us his kids are better than us. He's always got some ulterior motive to try and push the kid not to talk to us, to talk to a bigger school that probably doesn't want him and everything. And if that's the type of relationship that they're going to have with you, they're not going to mess with you. They're better off going to a program such as, let's say, a Hidden Gems. And Hidden Gems, you got Lucius Jones running the program, who is going to be the most open-armed guy to every single college, no matter if they're a NAIA school from Idaho or a high major school from Ohio or Kentucky.
Yeah, and that just, like I said, that just goes a lot back to being personable, because no one wants to deal with an asshole. I mean, at the end of the day, that's just how it goes. You want to deal with guys who just genuinely come across it as good people. And secondly, I think credibility goes a lot into that as well. I remember I was it was kind of in the beginning of the year, everyone's posting, which kids are on their rosters, and I remember this one team in particular. Every time they listed a kid, they said, oh, he's getting mid-major to high major interest, mid-major to high major interest. Well, I'm like, man, you guys have the best team in the country. If that's the case, I think a lot of it has to do with being honest, and getting the right people to watch the games. Because if not, you're not doing the kids any good.
No doubt. Well, let's hit this. This is the last one here of the tweets. You tweeted something yesterday, and I'm happy I happened to glance at it here when I was preparing here. You said, you touched on this earlier. You said that, you love basketball. Basketball is what brought you into this, but you're blessed to have had a chance to develop so many relationships with different basketball people.
And that's kind of like I was saying earlier, man. I kind of worry myself at times with how obsessed I am with basketball. I'm sure you guys.
You're into it.
I'm sure you guys. I'm sure you guys get pretty annoyed sometimes. With all the texts. Who is this kid playing with now? And hey, how did this guy do this weekend? But I can't turn my brain off. When it comes to basketball, and as much as I just genuinely, love the game, I love people more, and a lot just meeting new people. I'm a guy that will have a random conversation with anybody. I don't care who you are. I'm going to talk to you, and we're going to find something to talk about. Whether that kind of rubs people the wrong way or not. But I met a lot of great friends. I met one of my best friends. His name is Matt. It was so funny. He told me this a couple years later, but he was sitting in front of me at the City Series, the same event where I met you. And I could tell he was a Cleveland guy because, he knew all the kids. So I started talking to him a little bit, and I remember he first looked back at me like, why the hell are you talking to me, man? He just gave like this dirty look, and I mean, 2-3 years later, he's one of my best friends. So it's just awesome, how
Big Matt from Warrensville?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, good dude.
Yeah,
Sure.
good dude. So it's just awesome, and just the kind of different people that you meet. And I'm not sure if you said this or Stubbs said this. Somebody said this in one of our group chats. They said every person, no matter what you're interested in or what you do for a living, you have to attend one AAU event before you die, because you just experience just so many unusual characters that you won't find in any other environment. And I think that makes what we do so great. We get to meet so many different kinds of people from different parts of the country with different backgrounds, and it's just like a melting pot. And we're all different. We all do a lot of different things, but we're in that when we're all in that gym. We all have the same mindset, and that's just to watch basketball and enjoy it.
Well, that's what the whole one of the goals. The real goal of this podcast is just to hopefully fill different people from different worlds of basketball in on exactly that, different type of people in different other worlds of basketball, and have some understanding across industry. And the other thing is to really give people insight as to the characters of different people you see on the road, and then the character of those characters. And I really value, the friendships we've made. And so the group text between you, Jason, myself, Zach, Stubb, and Chaz, I mean, it's just awesome. And it's one of the things I really cherish about this basketball thing. And, we're out of time here, but I told you I might put you on the spot here. So let's talk about one more topic here. You are TJ number 2. TJ number 1, the great TJ Kelly. We've heard you do a decent impression. Is TJ Kelly around?
Yeah. He's around. There's Corey Opposite. Yeah, and this podcast. There can only be one. Yeah, and there can only be one Jay Morrow. I can hear him through his beard.
Drilled it, man. The TJ impersonator. One day we're gonna have to do a TJ and TJ podcast. But
could you imagine life without TJ Kelly or life without Coach Bob, or some of these guys that we meet? They're just they keep you on your toes, and they're great guys. TJ Kelly, AKA to Julius, is someone I've kind of been able to grow close to a little bit this summer. So he's awesome, man. I love him, man.
It's inspiring to see other people with a passion for the game, and even if they're a crazy character, I mean, just the energy for the game is really fun.
No doubt about it, man. That guy works, and as crazy as he might come across, man, he's full of knowledge. He might deliver it in a different way than most people, but if you actually have an ear to listen, he says a lot of good things, and so do a lot of other people.
No doubt, man. It's good shit. Well, let's wrap up here. We're out of time. Again, guys, that was TJ Peatross from Neo Spotlight, covering all things Northeast Ohio basketball. You can see it on neohiospotlight.com. If you're a college coach listening to this and you're not already following this website or following TJ on Twitter at NEO_Spotlight, you are greatly missing out. So make sure you give them a follow. Thanks again for all the college coaches listening. One thing I've really enjoyed in Louisville and Indianapolis before that is talking to some of you guys on the road that have had feedback on the podcast, have had ideas, that have listened. That's been great feedback. That's why we're trying to get other guys on here like TJ today to talk about different things in basketball, and we really appreciate it. So, TJ, thank you for coming on.
Hey, no problem. I appreciate it.
All right, man. I'm Corey Albertson. Jason Morrill's our producer. Triple Double Podcast. Thanks for listening, guys.